of former South African ambassador to France, Nathi Mthethwa, is said to be brought back home this week. His family says it'll only find closure once they know the cause of the death.
The scene was almost too clean. A luxury Paris hotel room, untouched except for one detail that shattered everything the world thought it knew. A forced window on the 22nd floor, a body in the courtyard below, and on the carpet, a single bent pair of scissors that told a story no one wanted to believe. For years, Nathi Mthethwa had escaped every scandal, every accusation, until now. But what if what the police found inside that room wasn't just evidence of but proof of something far darker? If you grew up in South Africa, you probably heard the name Nathi Mthethwa more times than you can count. He was one of those politicians who always seemed to be in the headlines, powerful, polished, and constantly surrounded by whispers. Once the Minister of Police, later the Minister of Arts and Culture, he was part of that inner circle of government officials who shaped the country's direction for more than a decade. But with every promotion came another controversy, another headline, another reason for people to question what was really going on behind the scenes. As Minister of Police, Mthethwa oversaw one of the darkest chapters in South Africa's post-apartheid history, the 2012 Marikana massacre, where 34 striking miners were shot dead by police. It was a moment that scarred the nation, one that many still say revealed the ugly truth about power and control in modern South Africa. Mthethwa was right in the middle of it all. His critics accused him of failing to take accountability, of protecting the system rather than the people it hurt. To his supporters, he was a loyal ANC soldier, just doing his job in impossible times. But to everyone else, he became a symbol of how politics can twist a man's image beyond repair. Then came his time as Minister of Arts and Culture, a role that should have been calm and creative, but quickly became another storm. Mthethwa's department was slammed for questionable spending, including the now infamous multi-million rand monumental flag project that was supposed to symbolize national unity. Instead, it became a public embarrassment, seen as another example of misplaced priorities in a country drowning in inequality. Every project seemed to come with a price tag and a scandal.
In Paris, that was really front and center in some of the tabloids here in France, and of course picked up internationally as well. The police and investigators saying that that was indeed.
When Mthethwa was appointed ambassador to France, many South Africans rolled their eyes. To some, it looked like a cushy reward, a comfortable overseas posting for a loyal comrade whose reputation at home had become radioactive. Others called it what it really felt like: political exile with a diplomatic badge. France became his escape, a place to start over, away from the noise and corruption hearings back home. But even oceans away, he couldn't outrun his past. The political ghosts of South Africa have long memories, and as new corruption probes reopened, his name started surfacing again. His once ironclad shield of power began to crack, and behind that confident smile, it seemed like something inside him was starting to break too.
They are currently in Pretoria as we speak in Port and will be leaving to France. However, Kulikani could not give clarity as to whether their flight will be departing tonight or tomorrow.
It started like any other night in the City of Lights, quiet, elegant, deceptively calm. But for Nathi Mthethwa, that Paris evening turned into something out of a dark thriller. Late Sunday night, he sent a message to his wife back in South Africa. Not the usual "I love you" or "see you soon" kind of message. This one was different. French authorities later described it as disturbing, part confession, part goodbye. It was the kind of message that makes your stomach drop the moment you read it. His wife immediately knew something was wrong. She called South African officials, and within hours, French police were alerted. When they finally tracked him down, it was too late. Monday morning, the staff at the Hyatt Regency Paris Étoile found his body in the inner courtyard, 22 floors below the room he had booked. It was a horrifying sight, the kind of thing that leaves even experienced officers silent. But what truly shook investigators wasn't just the fall itself, it was what they found inside his hotel room. The window on the 22nd floor had been forced open. In buildings like that, the windows aren't supposed to open fully. It's a safety rule. They're sealed shut with security locks, nearly impossible to tamper with without tools. Yet, this one was broken clean open. The French police knew instantly this wasn't a simple accident. Someone had used something to pry that window apart, and right there, on the floor near the glass, was the key clue: a single bent pair of scissors. Not a decorative souvenir, not something symbolic, just a normal, sharp steel pair of scissors, the kind you'd find in any office drawer. Only these had marks on them, pressure dents near the handle, tiny scratches along the blade. Investigators believed he used them to break the window's safety mechanism, giving himself access to the outside. That one small object changed everything about how they saw the scene. It wasn't just a fall. It was an act of force, one that required thought, effort, and brutal intent. When French investigators walked into Nathi Mthethwa's hotel room, they expected confusion, maybe chaos, maybe signs of a struggle. But what they found was unsettling for a very different reason. The room was almost too calm. Everything looked untouched, perfectly in place, except for one thing: the window. That thick, sealed glass pane on the 22nd floor had been forced open, not cracked, not loosened. Forced open with a kind of rough precision that told them whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. The window had a built-in safety latch, a mechanism designed to keep guests safe from accidents or worse. But that latch had been broken. And beside it, lying crooked on the carpet, was the unlikeliest piece of evidence imaginable: a simple pair of scissors.
The police and investigators saying that that was indeed not the case, and both cell phones were recovered, and certainly not in this park as was reported. So when it comes to the investigation, what we do know with...
At first glance, it sounded absurd. Scissors? In a case involving an ambassador's mysterious death? But the forensics team quickly realized those scissors were the key to everything. They weren't lying there by chance. They had been used with intent to jam, wedge, and eventually snap the metal latch that sealed the window. The tool was ordinary, but the effort behind it was brutal. Investigators found tiny metal shavings on the window frame and faint scrape marks that matched the tips of the blades perfectly. Whoever used them had to push hard. So hard that one handle bent slightly under the pressure. This wasn't a gentle act of curiosity. It was violent, deliberate, and full of purpose. What made the discovery even more haunting was what they didn't find. No drugs, no alcohol bottles, no pills, no blood or signs of struggle. Nothing that screamed fight or foul play. The only thing left behind was that one broken safety latch, the scissors, and a silence so heavy it filled the room. Even the message to his wife, the last words he ever sent, gave little away. It was emotional, strange, almost coded, but it didn't explain why he did what he did. From the very beginning, the French authorities leaned toward one explanation. Everything seemed to line up. The message to his wife that sounded like a farewell, the forced window, the complete absence of another person in the room. It was tidy, logical, and easy to close the file on. But that's exactly what bothered people. It was too neat, too convenient for a man whose entire life had been surrounded by chaos and scandal. It felt like a story written to make everyone comfortable, especially those who had the most to lose if the truth turned out to be something uglier.
But as it stands, senior members are in Pretoria and they are awaiting to travel to France to fetch Nathi Mthethwa's spirit, as they say, in accordance with the Zulu customs, but also to...
Mthethwa's didn't come out of nowhere. Just days before Paris, his name had reappeared in headlines back home. Witnesses in an ongoing corruption inquiry had dragged him into the spotlight again, accusing him of political interference during his time as Minister of Police. It was the kind of exposure that could destroy reputations, even careers, and Mthethwa knew it. He had been through countless controversies before, but this time felt different. This time, the knives were out, and the timing of his couldn't have been worse, or maybe too perfect. French investigators stuck with the logical conclusion, pointing out the clear sequence of events: a disturbing message, a forced window, and no third-party evidence. But critics back home weren't convinced. They called it the cleanest dirty story in South African politics. How could a man so cautious, so used to surviving scandal after scandal, choose such a violent public end? In a foreign country, no less. People began whispering that maybe it wasn't at all. Maybe the message wasn't a confession, but a warning. Maybe the room had been cleaned before the police even arrived.
Concrete information is recovered. The autopsy, of course, will be a key part of this. I asked Dr. Buthelezi a few days ago just after he'd returned from the morgue.
The idea of foul play gained traction fast. Journalists, analysts, even former colleagues began suggesting that he might have been silenced, that he knew too much, or that he was about to say something that powerful people didn't want out. And yet, The evidence, or the lack of it, left everything suspended in a fog of uncertainty. The police had no reason to reopen the case. The political establishment had every reason to move on. The moment news of Nathi Mthethwa's death hit South Africa, the entire country went into a frenzy. It wasn't just grief or shock. It was chaos mixed with suspicion. Within hours, social media exploded. Hashtags like #MthethwaFiles and #ParisCoverUp started trending, and the theories spread faster than any official statement. Everyone had an opinion. Journalists, political analysts, everyday South Africans who'd spent years watching corruption stories unfold. Nobody believed this was as simple as the French police claimed, not when it came to a man who'd spent his career walking through the mud of South African politics and somehow always coming out clean.
Conceivably after that, well, he says that is a matter he doesn't simply have an answer to. It could be a matter of weeks or even months for the investigation to follow its true course.
The African National Congress, ANC, his political home for decades, released a short, emotionless statement. It was polished, respectful, and safe. Too safe. Just a few lines of condolences to the family and gratitude for his service. But there was no curiosity, no mention of the questions that were already boiling over. People could see right through it. The ANC's silence felt less like respect and more like strategy. It was as if the party was tiptoeing around the truth, careful not to say too much or sound too interested. And for many South Africans, that alone said plenty. Meanwhile, the public started to connect the dots, or at least try to. Mthethwa's came just days after his name resurfaced in the ongoing corruption inquiries, with testimony that painted him as one of the key players in political interference during his time as police minister. That timing was too perfect to ignore. Some believed the stress of facing renewed scrutiny finally broke him, while others were convinced it was part of a much bigger, darker cleanup operation. They called it state housekeeping, when people tied to corruption conveniently disappear, die, or suddenly fall silent before they can testify.
Who is in Paris and was involved in identifying his body. Paul, this morning I also spoke to DIRCO spokesperson Crispin Peary, who told me that they will be updating with regard.
The media smelled. International outlets ran headlines questioning the mysterious of a South African diplomat in Paris. While back home, talk radio shows and podcasts dissected every possible angle. Some guests argued that he had simply been crushed under the weight of his own lies, that guilt and exposure had pushed him over the edge. Others said no, he was silenced before he could spill secrets that could bring down others. In South Africa, both versions sounded equally believable because the country's political history is full of both that don't make sense and accidents that look too deliberate. The ANC tried to take control of the narrative, but the harder they tried, the more people doubted them. It didn't help that the government barely commented on the French investigation, other than promising to cooperate. There were whispers that high-ranking officials had quietly flown to Paris to oversee the inquiry, a move critics called interference disguised as diplomacy. Every move made the story dirtier. Every unanswered question made it darker. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.